Okay, we are live on the Teflon Tales again, same day, same time, Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. So with me today, I have a guest who was a U.S. citizen until 2 days ago, and she became an Aussie yesterday. Welcome to the show, Kelly Phelan.
Hello, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So just talking about it. So you're both a U.S. citizen and a Australian right now. So congrats on that.
Yes, yeah, it's very exciting. It is, you don't realize until you're sitting in the actual presentation and you hear the comments that are being
Yeah.
made by the mayor, and it's like, oh, this is like a big deal. This is very cool. And yeah, I was really excited.
Yeah, so let's dive into something. I'm just going to read off from your LinkedIn profile, and that should reflect your Teflon life. Master
Mhm.
career strategist, ex business school professor, helping motivated high achievers with advanced degrees, MBAs, masters, PhD, JD, and set their careers on fire. Author, podcaster, speaker.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to pick something again off your LinkedIn profile. I think we'll double click on that, which is a word that I've heard for the first time, which
Okay.
is flurnings, right? Which is failure
Yes.
plus learnings, and it's so refreshing to hear somebody put this on their headline profile, right? I'm just going to read out for our viewers.
Mhm.
I've experienced my fair share of personal and professional flurnings, which is failure and learnings, and several career pivots. Those experiences led me to finding my true passion. That's why you are here, which is you
Mhm.
living the Teflon
Yeah.
life. So, talk a little bit about at what point in your life did you choose to make that your profile heading, and then we can deep dive into your career pivots.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think that for me, I've really had some major changes that were not expected. I really thought I was actually having a conversation with somebody today about, when you're in uni, you think you know what you're going to do with your life.
Yeah.
And I thought that I knew what I was going to do with my life. I was going to become a diplomat. And so I majored in foreign policy, and I realized it was for me, not for me. And I learned that, the hard way by doing an internship and then going, oh, this was a mistake, and so I think that's the thing is, it used to be that I would really look at something as, oh my goodness, I failed, this is terrible. And then it's, why look at it as a rejection or a failure? Why not just reframe it and make it more positive and say, okay, well, I learned something, and I learned that I don't like that, and so I've learned that I need to try something different. And so that's the way that I try to always frame it for anybody that I'm dealing with or working with, whether it's a student or a client, is, hey, you've learned something, and now we can move on and try something different and hopefully find something that you like better. So I think that's really important.
No, it's also it's just so resonant with what Michael Jordan used to say. You're going to miss every shot that you don't take. So again, it goes back to
Exactly.
that point, right?
Definitely.
Um, okay, so I'm going to another thing which just talks about your journey, right? 17 countries in Africa alone, four
Hmm.
languages, and then
Yep.
I saw your TED talk on.
Oh.
It was interesting because you talked about in order for you to experience what Africa is, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, you can go in there as a tourist, like we did a couple of years ago, and we spent 10 days in a safari, and you're back out there. But that's a microcosm, and the country that you see is purely from a tourist point of view. But what you talked about is just to kind of experience the need for people to understand that continent, what it means.
Hmm.
And I still have the graphic in my head about the shot from the sky, and then the which countries are lit up and why the content was actually literally dark, right? Which you
Yeah.
showed in your TED talk. So, talk a little bit about how that, again, going back to the Teflon analogy, the ability to kind of see different things, different perspectives, gives you the confidence to be able to try different things. And yeah, like you said, if things don't heat up in a certain pan, you can actually go to a different pan. So how did that experience shape your personality?
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so we really never traveled. But I always had a big interest. I read a ton, and I always had an interest in foreign countries. And, every time I wanted to go somewhere, I found an opportunity to move somewhere. So, for instance, I always wanted to visit Alaska, so I actually took a job there for, 2 years, and I learned how to mush dog sleds and do that sort of thing. And so for me, as much as I am often a tourist and I travel and visit different places, I love to live somewhere and really experience the culture, even though you're still doing it to a certain extent from an outsider's perspective. But yeah, so I spent 2 years in Botswana. I loved it. It was an incredible experience. But I also spent several months, working in Sierra Leone and Uganda and lots of other places. And so it really does, you see things that feel so foreign to you, but it is so natural, to them. And yeah, it's really given me a new perspective and a new way of, framing and thinking about what it is that I do, and really a different way of, creative way, thinking outside the box that a lot of us learn from such a young age. It's like you almost have to spend your time traveling and moving and living elsewhere to undo some of, those institutions that we learn from such, from childhood. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it reminds me again of a quote from Adam Grant's book, Think Again, which he talks about. Like, there's opinion, right, and there's identity, right, and
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's an amazing thing, right? Sometimes you kind of, yeah, you frame an opinion that becomes an identity, but if you keep
Mm-hmm.
those separate, then to your point, you can unlearn stuff. It doesn't change the identity, but obviously your opinion keeps morphing. So you kind of glossed over something which I'm going to double click on, which
Uh-huh.
is your move to Alaska, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And again, this is again talking about the pivotal moment and the decision that you made, which is really taking on the role of a dean of students at a boarding school in Alaska after
Mm-hmm.
completing your Ivy League degree, right? So, and again, it is a Teflon moment because you've gotten hot at something. I mean, yeah, I mean, getting an Ivy League degree is obviously extremely coveted, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
coming out of that, you flew north, right?
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, again, that was at a fairly young age too, right? So, talk about what caused that. And clearly, as you mentioned in your LinkedIn post, your parents were mortified at your decision, so you had to kind of go through that. Uh,
Yep.
how did that again? How has that helped you kind of lead a more okay? So you got to change, and then not get tied down or bogged down.
Right. So funny enough, so when I was in high school, I learned Russian and I got quite good at it. And this was the very first time I traveled. So I won a scholarship to spend 10th grade in Russia.
Oh
And so
wow!
so I got really good at Russian at a
Yeah,
young
yeah.
age.
Знаю русский язык. Okay, but that's it, right? Don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So then fast forward. So I speak Russian very well. Fast forward to uni. In uni, I did an internship with the State Department. And they said, your Russian skills are excellent. We want you to be a translator. And I said, well, I don't want to be a translator. I want to be a diplomat. And they said, that's not going to happen. And I said, well, if that's, if I'm going to be stuck in a cubicle doing nothing but listening and typing all day long, I don't want to do that for the next 40 years of my life. So I started looking around for other options. And so I found this opportunity at the in Alaska. And my parents were mortified because they said, I don't care if you're getting coffee at the State Department. At least I can be proud of saying my daughter works at the State Department. Don't go to Alaska and live in this tiny little village of 200 people. And it was really, my parents didn't talk to me for months, actually, to be completely honest. And interestingly enough, my father came to visit while I was there, and he could not believe the impact that I was having, on
Wow.
these students. And he said, wow, you're actually doing something here. And I said, yeah, I'm not just fluffing around. I feel like I'm making an impact, and my students appreciate it. And, I've found that this is what I really enjoy. And I know I'm not going to do it forever, but, why not give it a try now? And so it was kind of my first foray into, I'm going to think outside the box and try to do something a little bit different, not just, be a pencil pusher and a bean counter my entire life. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So talking a little bit about that last piece, which is pencil pushers and bean counters, right? And again, this is a mid Teflon Tales advice question for the viewers and listeners, which is people out there who've been on a single track, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
haven't had the, I'll be blunt, haven't had the courage,
Mhm.
And then sometimes it's necessity, right? You need to feed your family, and therefore you've taken some decisions. But now, let's say they're in the midpoint of their careers, and obviously COVID has caused many to rethink
Yeah.
their priorities, right? uh,
Mhm.
is what advice do you have? I mean, if they haven't done what Kelly has done, which is early on in their lives, experimented, gotten
Mhm.
that real life experience to be able to essentially be bold and make courageous decisions, how do they come unstuck from something that they have been doing all their lives?
Yeah, it's hard. It really is hard when you get comfortable and you've been doing, something that you're so accustomed to. And yes, it's definitely hard to leave that guaranteed income and, knowing how much money you're going to get each week, and to go out and strike it new. Because very often when you do move to a different industry, it may be a lateral move or it may actually be a bit of a step
Yep.
backwards. And that is very frightening to many people. And I mean, I guess the one thing that I would say is, one is you only live once. so, so if you're, I actually posted something today talking about company culture and toxic workplaces. And it's important that you're enjoying what
Yep.
you're doing and where you are. But I do understand that there's, the need to feed your family. So, lots of people reinvent themselves. Lots of people reinvent themselves in their 40s, 50s, 60s. I actually had somebody come to me the other day and say, "I'm 65 and I want my what did he say? My final chapter. Help me decide
Oh,
what I'm going to
wow.
do." And I said,
Wow.
"Oh, okay, cool. Most people are looking to retire at 65. If you want to
Yeah.
go on and do something different, okay, what should we do?" Um, but I think that probably one of the biggest is trying to ignore the noise, because everybody has an opinion. And very
Yeah.
often people who are very institutionalized and accustomed to always doing, the same thing forever, it is very scary to them to make that kind of change or to see somebody else that they love making that change. So, you might need to talk to a few different people to figure out what really makes sense. But so many skills these days are transferable, that if you formulate your narrative appropriately, you definitely can, you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to totally start over. So I think there is plenty of options out there to do those sorts of things.
Great
Mhm.
advice. So, guys, coming back to your journey, and again, this goes back to something you and I spoke about, was it 10 days ago,
Uh-huh.
which is really your semester at sea, right, when
Ah,
COVID
yep.
hit.
Yep.
And again, for me, it's just one of those things which, I mean, lots of people don't even know what it means. But yeah, you're in a ship with students, you're away at sea, COVID hits, and
Mhm.
obviously things come undone, right? So,
Right.
and again, having that Teflon like ability to say, okay, so it was supposed to be 6 months, we're supposed to have a good time, and unfortunately, this is happening. How
Mhm.
do you cool down? What were some of the things that went to your head? And again, how did that translate into life learnings for you?
Oh, wow. Well, just to give a little background, if you don't mind. So, in January 1st of 2020, I got on a cruise ship with several hundred um, uni students. Everybody on the ship was a uni student. They were going to be taking classes on the ship and then traveling to about 17 different countries over the
Wow.
next 5 months. And we got to Japan and we found out COVID had happened. And then we basically spent the next 2 months floating. We didn't really go to anywhere that we were supposed to. And then they kicked us off very abruptly in South Africa and said, find your own way home and do it fast because the
Wow.
world is closing. And so, you know, for us on the ship, we were constantly dealing with, okay, well, now we'll go to the next port. Oh, okay, well, the next port won't let us in. Okay, well, now we're going to go to a different port. And we get to the different port and they literally say, oh, we're actually not going to let you off the ship. You can
Wow.
refuel, but that's it. You're not coming off. So there was this constant changing. There was a lot of stress with the students. And so for me, particularly, having a daughter myself, my biggest thing was if my daughter was in this situation, I would want to know somebody was looking out for her. So I spent a lot of time, yes, I was teaching, but I spent a lot of time sort of being that extra shoulder to cry on for the students and saying, okay, well, this is how we can make this better. This is how you can, use it to grow and to move forward and those sorts of things. And well, for me, interestingly enough, if that had not happened, I would not be getting my citizenship right now
Wow.
because The rule is that the year prior to citizenship, you have to be in the country. You cannot leave the country for more than 90 days. And so because I would have been gone for 5 months, I would have had to actually wait 2 years to get my citizenship. So we came home, I did the math and I said, oh, we've been gone for less than 90 days in the last year. I'm going to apply for citizenship right now. So if it hadn't happened for that, I wouldn't have got that. So for me, it's always looking at, okay, well, how can we make this difficult situation into one that's a little bit better? Maybe not the one that we want, but there's got to be a way that we can make the best out of this. And I think it's important to do that, whether it's a job, whether it's a move, whether it's a very disappointing end to a vacation or a trip, then that's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, as you're kind of walking through that, I can only imagine, right? The stress and the emotions, and it's like, are we going to get off? Are we not? And then, yeah, the work that you did to
Mm-hmm.
keep those students, yeah, I mean, amazing. So, talk again, looking through your LinkedIn profile, which is kind of homework that I do before I can get on the show. Uh, you have an amazing knack for presenting videos,
Oh, thank you.
right?
Thank you.
And it comes across naturally. Now, clearly, it wasn't the case when you started. So the
Mhm.
question to you is, when did you start? How did you get so good at it? And like, what was the learnings along the way?
Oh my goodness. So I other than being on LinkedIn, I've really never done any social media until the last, few months. And this is actually funny. So my daughter came to me and said, "I want to go on TikTok." And I looked at my husband and said, "Well, what's a TikTok? Like, I don't. What are we talking about?" This was about 6, 8 months ago.
Uh,
And so we looked at TikTok and we said, "Absolutely not. No, you're not going on TikTok." Well, then, funny enough, like 2 weeks later, I had been looking at TikTok and realizing how people were using it. And I said, oh, well, I could do this and put it out
mm.
there for some of what I do.
When
And
was this,
then,
Kelly?
oh, this was probably about right around the end of the year. Yeah, so about
Okay,
6 months ago, about
okay,
6 months
okay.
ago. And I said, well, I'm just going to play with this and see what happens. And the next thing I know, my daughter picks up my phone and she's looking for something. And she goes, when did you get TikTok? And my husband goes, when did you get TikTok? And I said, well, anyway, so yeah, and honestly, in TikTok, it's not like I'm dancing or singing or goofing off. I'm really just saying, if this is the question that you have in a job interview, think about answering it this way. This is how you can
Mhm.
explain it. So it's really just been kind of putting it out there and yeah, just becoming more comfortable on camera. And it's not like I spend really any time, editing or doing anything like that. It takes me about, 10 minutes to make a 2 or 3 minute video. And that's it. I try to keep it simple because, I'm not trying to be a journalist or a documentarian. I'm just trying to get some information out there that'll help people. But yes, as time has evolved, I've become more comfortable and it's sort of just like, oh, well, this is who I am. And if you like my stuff, then here you go. And if you don't, you can't love everybody and everybody can't love you. So I just do what I can to help people.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, again, so resonant because I just did a post yesterday about UGAT unabashedly giving all the time. I guess made up this stuff because there's so many givers out there. And again, to your point, it's like, hey, if you make it valuable for somebody,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, yeah, it's going to come back at you, and you build this karma bank. So one of the other things, again, going back to the Teflon analogy, right, which is especially for entrepreneurs, especially for people still trying to find their way or trying to be better at what they do or scaling their business, whatever the case may be,
Mm-hmm.
the challenge is to cool down as quickly or quicker than you've gotten hot, right? Which is really
Mm-hmm.
maintaining mental balance and having a sense of essentially discipline around you to do the things that actually rejuvenate you, so you can come
Mm-hmm.
back the next day. So, what tips does Kelly have to actually ensure that you can cool down?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to go off topic for just a
Absolutely.
second. I'll come back to it though. So, I used to work in the hospitality and tourism industry. So, I worked
Mm.
for Disney and then I worked in Las Vegas. And there is nothing like working in a 5,000 room hotel and finding out that they have oversold the hotel. And so you have to tell 200 people
Oh wow.
to take a hike. We don't have any rooms for you. And, there, if you ever want to learn how to deal with hot-tempered folks and how to just let it, be a duck and let it roll off your back, that is the way to do it. Let me tell you. Um, but yeah, so I think for me, it's just, I really don't take anything personally. I certainly used to when I first started working, and I would go home and I would think about it. And somebody said to me, they're not going home and thinking about you, so don't give it don't give it a second thought. And so that's really the way that I look at it is, I have my family and I have, my hobbies. And so it's, this is work and this is what I need to focus on, but I'm not going to stress about it afterwards. But we recently got a puppy about 6 months ago. I spent a lot of time walking the puppy. So I do enjoy that. Yes, and recently I have made it my focus for the second half of this year to get enough sleep and to meditate. So now I listen to a little meditation as I go off to sleep each night. And I'm not sure if it's working yet. I've only been doing it a few weeks, but yeah, get back to me in January. I'll let you know.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna put you back on. Right? Say, Kelly, how was the last
Okay.
6 months?
Exactly.
So
But I
coming
think
back at, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but I think it's important to experiment with different things, whether it's reading, whether it's lemon water, whatever it may be. I think it's important to experiment and find out what works for you, whatever that may be.
So again, I'm going to double click on that because that's probably going to be my last question to you, right? Which is again from a viewership from people who have not experimented, and this goes back to what I asked you earlier, right? But a different twist to it, which is you mentioned something about the world will judge, right? And some people who have not experimented and have like they have the best interests at heart, but they see you as doing something crazy, right? So from and then you mentioned community, you mentioned you need to have people that you can bounce your ideas off. So what sorts of community have helped you as you've navigated your way? Again, looking at your profile, it's like, hey, there's lots of different career pivots that you have done, right? And clearly, there has to have been a community that has helped you through this. So again, for the viewers and listeners, is to say, hey, if they've gone down a single track and they're very good at what they do, but the community that they've built is built around that work profile that they have. Now they want to experiment. How do they go about building that alternative community that can be less judgmental and can actually help them through that transition?
Right. Well, I mean, for me, I will talk to anyone. And I think that that's part of it is not being afraid to put yourself out there because you never know, who you might meet, whether it's somebody standing in line at the grocery store or at the
Yeah.
dog park, just having a little chit chat with people, and not being afraid to say, oh, okay, well, that's what you do. Well, actually, I'm a little bit interested in this as well, and seeing where that conversation may take you. So, I mean, I certainly have done quite a bit with volunteering. I mean, especially, I mean, even now, I mean, I have my business and I spend plenty of time working with clients for the purpose of making money, but I also do a lot of volunteering. I've gotten in touch with schools and said, are you interested in having me do some workshops for you? Or, and that often leads to, getting in touch with other people. So I think that that's just, important is to look at what it is that you have an interest in, and then look for opportunities. I was working with a client who had finished her law degree, and she did her law degree part-time while she was working full-time, and as a result she didn't have any experience in law. She had never worked in law, so nobody really wanted to hire her. And so I said, well, what is it that you really have an interest in? And she said, well, my parents were refugees here after World War II, and I really have an interest in immigration law and refugee law, this, that, and the other thing. So there's a school specifically for, not for refugees, but for new arrivals to Australia to help them get their English up before they go into the regular high schools. And so we actually contacted the school and said, do you ever need help with the parents who are trying to file their immigration paperwork or any of that. So she spent time helping those people. As a result, she ended up meeting some lawyers and ended up getting a job. So I think
Wow.
that the more you can kind of expand your network and think outside the box and think about, where else you can use your skills or build your skills really helps. So yeah, just don't be afraid to ask. I think that's the biggest thing.
Great advice. Again, Kali, thanks for your time, and thanks for everything that you're
Sure.
doing.
Thank you. This was a
Thanks.
lot of fun. We should do it again sometime for sure.
Again, I remember January, I'm going to come back and ask you.
Okay, I'll be here.
All right. Bye bye.
Thanks, Ashwin. Bye.